All three of these groups of women are supreme role models, activists, self-realized, and heroes of the women's rights and civil rights movements. We can learn a great deal from honoring their stories and their lives. Hello and welcome to On the Fringe. I'm Dr. Jules, one of your hosts for this vlog. And today, obviously, we're not going to be out on our motorcycles, but very soon we will be, and be bringing you adventures of exciting women all over the country. So today, we're going to take a look back in history and explore the pioneers of women's adventure motorcycling, part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, please join us. And here is part 2. Welcome to On the Fringe. Avis and Effie Hotchkiss. In 1915, 1 year into World War I, began the journey of Avis and Effie Hotchkiss. Effie's brother had taught her to ride a motorcycle at age 16. Her first cycle was a Martian Metz. The company closed down in 1913, but was the first company to develop a 90-degree V-twin engine. The man credited with being the first to invent the term motorcycle was Charles H. Metz. He used the term in an 1899 advertisement for his Orient, which is also considered by some as America's first mass-produced motor-powered cycle. The 1910 Marsh Metz was a traditional belt-drive machine with sprung seat and leaf spring leading link fork. It was a 499cc with polished engine cases and liberal use of nickel plating and red paint to make it gleam. Sophisticated rod and bell crank controls are similar to what Indian used early on. But for their cross-country trip, the Hotchkisses traveled on a Harley-Davidson 11F model with a sidecar. Mother Avis did not fear trouble, as she knew that Effie was competent and capable both as a driver and as a mechanic. The pair landed at Ocean Beach 60 days later and poured their jar of Atlantic seawater into the Pacific Ocean. They became the first women to cross America by motorcycle. Augusta and Adeline Van Buren. Just 1 year after the Hotchkisses' journey, Augusta and Adeline Van Buren rode 5,500 miles in 60 days on their Indian Power Plus 1,000cc motorcycles. The Van Burens were 22 and 24 years old and active in the national preparedness movement as America prepared to enter World War I. They were both born into privilege, but both had a wild, adventurous streak. The sisters had learned to fly airplanes, race horses, ride motorcycles, and could even handle themselves in a boxing ring. Can you imagine those girls in 1916? The sisters set out to prove that women could ride as well as men and serve as military dispatch riders who were armed with a revolver. Dispatch riders were used by armed forces to deliver urgent orders and messages between headquarters and military units. They also delivered carrier pigeons for use in messaging. They had a vital role at the time when telecommunications were limited and insecure. No cyber hack danger back then with this system. To prove their abilities, and along the way from Brooklyn to San Francisco, they rode to the summit of Pikes Peak in Colorado, scaling the 14,109-foot peak. They became, thus, the first women to arrive at Pikes Peak by any motor vehicle alone, let alone motorcycles. The sisters had been following the Lincoln Highway from New York to the Golden Gate Bridge, but much of it was no more than dirt or gravel roads, cow pastures, and desolate, unsettled spaces. During their travel, they were still bandits holding up the stagecoaches along this very route. Their way was illuminated by acetylene gas headlights. Their gear consisted of leather caps, goggles, khakis, boots, and long leather coats. In this year, there were no maps in existence of the territories west of the Mississippi, and little fuel or water along their way. The Van Buren sisters' big adventure resulted at one point in getting lost 100 miles west of Salt Lake City, and they were saved by a prospector just as they ran out of water. Finally reaching San Francisco was not enough road for the Van Burens. After they reached California, they went on to cross the border to Tijuana, Mexico. Gutsy they were. But in the end, after all of Gussie and Addie's accomplishments, the U.S. Army cruelly rejected their bid to become dispatch riders. Unsung heroines. The Van Buren's big adventure was minimized in the media as an attempt to escape their roles as housewives. They were criticized for wearing nifty khaki and leather uniforms and chastised as unladylike villains. Later, though, Adeline Van Buren pursued a career as an educator and earned her law degree. Augusta became a pilot and joined Amelia Earhart's 99's International Women's Flying Organization. But it took until 2002 for the Van Buren's achievement to be celebrated as they were inducted into the American Motorcyclist Association Hall of Fame. These were two brave and amazing sisters. Bessie Stringfield. No celebration of women pioneers would be complete without Bessie Stringfield. Bessie was the first African American woman to cross the United States on motorcycle. Stringfield had been a civilian courier for the U.S. Army, able to do in World War II what the Van Buren sisters were so cruelly denied in World War I: deliver important messages via motorcycle. During the 4 years Bessie Stringfield worked for the Army, she crossed the United States 8 times. Bessie made some money during her cross-country trips by performing motorcycle tricks at circuses. It is rumored that she rode the Wall of Death and did other motorcycle stunt shows during her travels. Bessie was also trained as a nurse and would make some extra money caring for people along the way. She participated in hill climbing and trick riding competitions too. So why has Bessie Stringfield become such an amazing role model today for women of color, women in general, and everyone else too? Can you imagine the faith, strength of character, and resiliency Bessie had to possess to deal with 1930s and 1940s societal racism and misogyny? She followed her heart and her own inner voice against the wall of resistance most of us would run from. Bessie regularly encountered racism and was actually run down by a white man in a pickup truck on purpose while traveling in the South. Southern legislatures passed laws of racial segregation directed against Black people at the end of the 19th century, statutes known as Jim Crow laws. I wonder if you can imagine what it would be like to travel alone as a woman of color in a nation whose values were these. What do you think Bessie had to go through? In 1950s, Stringfield moved to Miami. The police arrested her repeatedly and harassed her for being a woman of color riding a motorcycle. They told her not so nicely that women of color were not permitted to ride a motorcycle. But Bessie was a wise negotiator, and she eventually gained the Miami police captain's approval by demonstrating her superb riding skills. Afterwards, she did not have trouble with the police anymore. In Bessie's honor, we can all toss a penny onto a map and follow the road to our next adventure, as she so often did. No matter what your age, background, or beliefs, these women pioneers of motorcycle adventuring are impressive and interesting. In the words of Augusta Van Buren, woman can if she will. Thank you for joining us for another episode of On the Fringe.